Good afternoon and welcome to our continued coverage of the very important and all-important Budget 2017, the very first one under President Akufo-Addo, and based on his orders under Article 179, the Finance Minister of this Republic had to go to Parliament and not only tell them about the budgetary estimates for the year, but also tell them how far we came with 2016 targets and how far we went with achieving or not achieving some of these targets, and proceeding also to tell us what the economic policies for 2017 is, and many other things that are supposed to be said out there are what you heard him do in Parliament. Beyond that, we brought you also comprehensive coverage with George Yafi and co on the grounds there, give you incisive interviews of which politicians had their say. Here in our studios, we will have an analytical view with the very brains that are outside politics, but have a proper appreciation of what happens within the emblem of not only entrepreneurship, economics, and also the policy space, but also what happens within the business environment in general. My name is Raymond Alqua, and I'll be joined in this conversation by Courage Kingsley Mate, who is a senior economic analyst with Data Bank Research, and also joining us in this conversation is Paul Drepson, who's an entrepreneur. Welcome, gentlemen, to what's supposed to be a very long day. I hope you are doing well this afternoon.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. Thanks for having us.
Thank you. We did hear him say a lot of things. The finance minister, being the very first one, calm, collected. People were worried about his demeanor because of what they've heard of him as being too slow in delivery, but this seems to be a very different one. We're talking about lots of that. Our cracks, the crux of our conversation will also be the just opposing the economic policies he gives out there and the plethora of promises which many, including the minority, have started tagging as populist and not well thought through, against the limited fiscal space we say we are to actually operate. That's one thing that we actually be dealing with on this show. But first and foremost, let me get initial comments from you first. And Marty, you heard him and you've heard budgets over the period. What was the main striking and highlights of this particular speech?
Well, for me, if you picked the MPP's manifesto under economy, there are two key pillars. One, restoring macroeconomic stability. Two, switching from taxation to production. I see this budget as one that is seeking to strike a balance between restoring macroeconomic stability and as well stimulating growth. If this was monetary policy, I'd have said under inflation targeting, I'd have said this is an operation within a constrained discretion. You know, in the midst of the fiscal constraints, the government is seeking to use the fiscal policy tools to stimulate production, and we'll come into details.
Certainly, we'll be getting into details of all of the big business and economic jargons there. But, I mean, Paul, you heard the over 2-hour delivery.
Yeah.
The understanding is that this is his first one.
Yeah.
This is the one that will set the tone for the rest in the next 4 years that he will be delivering if he continues to be finance minister in this republic for the President Akufo-Addo. Were you impressed with his delivery? Did you get the things that you really wanted to hear from him?
Well, thank you very much for the opportunity. Let me first of all use this opportunity to say a very good afternoon to yourself and to your cherished viewers. Basically, I think that, well, I didn't watch, but I listened, I mean, to the budget that was delivered in Parliament. And I must say that, I mean, listening to the over 2.5-hour budget which was delivered, I would say I was a bit impressed because if you listen to the content, if you listen to the kind of things that was put out there, some way, somehow, one would say that it is in fulfillment of the MPP's promises that they made prior to the 2016 election. But of course, I mean, the delivery was good, no two ways about it. He delivered, I mean, in a manner that any ordinary person will be able to understand him.
We'll talk about entrepreneur-specific programs or policies that may have been put out there and which ones you probably will be interested in and would want highlighted along the line. But let me come back to you, Mate. I mean, I got the impression that he painted a picture of what the MPP considers to be the actual state of the economy first, which is the duty of the finance minister in this case. Then proceeded to say, regardless of this constraint, we are opening up some space to be able to do the things that we would want to do. First and foremost, the discussion about debt to GDP ratio, the discussion of we having to put wages and other statutory payments together with what's supposed to be government's responsibility together, and that taking more than what's required for any government to implement new policies. All of that limits any government from operating. Do you think that he captured and probably encapsulated the economic situation in the country in a more succinct way?
Yes, absolutely. And I thought he gave it a very good shot. You know, in the State of the Nation address, as you said, if you add up total employee compensation and statutory payments and interest payments, it adds up to 99.6% of total tax revenue. One of the key reasons why the government has not had the flexibility it needed to embark on fiscal operations is because of this key or three areas that consumes tax revenue. And now, one of the solutions that are being preferred, especially in this budget.
Is that even an issue in the first place? When the NDC came in, when John Dramani Mahama came to presidency in 2013, when he took over formally after the next election, this was around 120%. 96% looks like a nice picture then.
No, I think actually it was in 2009 when he came in, and then they called on the IMF. The IMF then helped them with the technical and balance of payment support, which created the fiscal space and the borrowing space. And then in 2013, when the second term commenced, then we had a lot of borrowings and a lot of implementation of this single spine and so on and so forth. And then it narrowed the fiscal space, and then we borrowed a lot more again. And so we are back to where we were as at 2009 when we needed fiscal space.
Okay, so now let's understand this perspective that you bring to this particular issue. Government admits that it has limited space within the fiscal rigidities that it has to operate in. The solution is exactly what?
Well, the solution is one. If you notice from the presentation, they've placed a ceiling of 25% of tax revenue on statutory allocations. Now, what it means is that whatever tax revenue I get, when I reallocate it amongst all the various agencies, I must not exceed 25%, so that I then have enough space to do other things. Otherwise, they would have consumed so much because of the legislation that insists that you must give so much to them. Now, there is a need to change that legislation, ensuring that no matter how you allocate it, it must not exceed 25% of tax revenue. Then there's now space for you to engage in your priority spendings. Then there's the other case of tax exemption. If you look at 2015 fiscal data, what I noticed was that the target...
But that will require some constitutional changes.
Of course. And that was why it was laid before Parliament.
Specific laws in the first place.
Exactly, and that was why it was laid before Parliament, because
is that a step in the right direction?
Exactly.
Going to say, for example, that Get Fund and the other statutory payments into specific funds that we have thought through over a period of time, and we needed to limit government spending in there and actually give them money that is not going to be changed by any government. Is it justified to be changing that long-term strategy to deal with specific issues?
First of all, it was Parliament that passed it. And then now he's requesting the same Parliament to help reallocate the same resources. You know, over time, the priority should change. You know, and so what they are saying
but
is
shouldn't the priority change when we are done with virtually what we want to do in this particular sector? So Get Fund was supposed to promote educational infrastructure. We still have a huge, what they call it, fiscal, we have infrastructure deficit that 10 billion people are quoting. We've not bridged that gap yet. So why are we seeking to beat down on that particular fund?
But at the same time, you are pretending to give what you don't have. That's why you are building up arrears. Because the fund says allocate X%.
But is the crux of this conversation not that a political party sought governance based on promises? Specific promises, I now realizes that it needs more money to fund. That's why it's going into areas that are seemingly protected.
Well, I wouldn't say seemingly protected. There were areas that were, mandated by law. And then they were not cast in stone. Times have changed and the priorities have changed. And because of that, they feel like, because as they were, they rightly mentioned that it was consuming the space.
You saw the backlash that came out when there was a discussion of whether or not Heritage Fund, for example, could be used in this particular case. And Paul, you understand that there was a lot of talk in this country about we not agreeing to use Heritage and to fund SHS, free SHS. Do you think that if the government had explained that this is what we're going to do to get money, to promote some of these policies and the removal of taxes and make money available for other things, do you think Ghanaians would have agreed to some of these?
Yeah, thank you very much. I mean, you realize that we live in an age where information is very important, especially when you are dealing with a country like Ghanaians. I mean, when people don't have information, they speculate. When people don't have information, what comes to mind is what they discuss and what they talk about. And so when government is able to come out and is able to make information available to the people, then it makes it easier for the people to be able to appreciate what government wants to do and how government wants to do it. So for instance, if the government comes out to say that, well, I mean, we have indicated clearly that when we are elected into power, we will implement the free SHS policy. And this is how we intend to implement the policy. This is how we intend to fund that particular policy. When Ghanaians know how you intend to fund that particular policy, you will realize that there wouldn't be much of speculations. You will recall that even prior to the 2016 elections, I mean, His Excellency the President was interviewed on BBC. And I think one of the questions that he was asked was how he and his government, when voted into power, intends to fund the free SHS policy.
And which of course was actually prior to the 2012 election.
Definitely. Which of course he made it very clear that he will disclose, I mean, how he intends to fund it to the Ghanaian people.
Subsequently they did.
Definitely.
In the run up to the election then.
So you realize that, I mean, just a few weeks ago, we had a situation where the senior minister came out and said that, well, as a government, we are looking at how best we would be able to fund the free SHS using the Heritage Fund. And not long after that, you have the Minister of Finance coming out to say that, no, we are not going to use the Heritage Fund, but we are going to use other sources of funding. And so for me, I think that, I mean, the public having access to adequate information and accurate information helps us to be able to know exactly what government wants to do and how they want to do it.
Do you think, Marty, that government was probably shocked with the kind of limited fiscal space it found itself? So then let's look for ways to do this in a more appropriate way. Because if you do recall, Nana Dankwa indeed said that the money was first going to come from GNPC, contributions of the oil funds to GNPC. Then he realized that it could be problematic doing that. Then there was a discussion and he insisted it was going to be oil money sometime later on. So do you think it was the realities of fiscal difficulties that is making the NPP now resort to what is an unconventional way of funding such policies?
Absolutely. I think they were shocked. You know, it's one thing to promise whilst in opposition. It's another to face the music when you are in power. And so, having assumed power, they saw that what they were seeing was probably through a different lens. And so they are now having to face reality. And the reality on the ground is that only 3 items consumes all of your tax revenue.
But I mean, for a political party that's run this country before, and you do recall in the year 2001, we were told a similar story by the NPP when they said, we didn't know this was the extent of damage to the economy of the Republic of Ghana, so we need to actually go to HIPAA. That was justification for HIPAA. Couldn't they have been more measured in introducing some of the policies which were very lofty to many?
Well, I agree with you to a great extent. But you see, there's also the other side where a government in power, the incumbent, promises to continue with the IMF program and remain disciplined even in the lead up to the elections, only to turn out to do something else. You have passed a public financial management law that ensures that there is transparency, accountability in government expenditure. And so with that in mind, you would think that if you go by the PFM law, some of these overruns should not be recorded. You get to power and you realize that some of the MDAs bypass the public financial management system, which you never anticipated. And so that resulted in the shock that you are now seeing.
It's interesting, and then because of the fiscal space and the most important part, the government also had some very ambitious targets. For example, it says it doesn't want to exceed 6.5 when it comes to what they call it, the fiscal deficits in this particular case. Is it realistic to you?
I think that there are some of the targets that are quite consistent with our own in-house forecasts, and 1 or 2 are quite bullish. You know, for instance, let's start with the 6.5% fiscal deficit. If you follow the Data Bank Africa strategy report that we publish quarterly, in January we did that publication and we gave our own in-house forecast. And for fiscal deficits, as at January when we published, we thought that it would be about 7.3% by end of this year.
Okay.
And I think as at now, we still stand by the 7.3%. We would have to look at the numbers again and see there's a revision.
This is regardless of their bold and ambitious policies
we think
and plans to rake in more money
I
and
think
spend less on what's supposed to be cutting corruption. You're not thinking that you're going to revise it downwards?
I think the 7.3% for now still holds. And so in that regard, of course, we always have a margin of error. So that is not to say that it is cast in stone, but we still stand by the 7.3%. So in that sense, the 6.5% appears a little bullish, especially on the back of the fact that you are cutting some taxes, and that tax imposes some responsibilities on you. If you don't ensure those responsibilities are carried out effectively, there may be some shocks in that regard. For instance, you must ensure compliance because you have reduced taxes, hoping that the lower taxes now everybody pays and then it make up for the shortfalls. So you must ensure compliance. You must also ensure tax exemptions that you want to reduce are reduced and people play by the rule. If you ensure that they pass behind you and grant exceptions which you did not expect, then there will be also shocks in that regard. So these reductions in taxes imposes some responsibilities on you to ensure compliance and other things. To the extent that you are not able to ensure this compliance, that is where there is a risk to the fiscal deficit projections.
Inflation?
I think inflation is quite realistic. I mean, our forecast was 11%. I think you are looking at 11.2%, give or take, not too far off. So in that sense, I think, of course, that is not to say that there will be a sustained decline in inflation throughout the year. In fact, based on what we are looking at, inflation in February could go up above 13.3% that we are seeing. So between now and end of year, we are likely to see some fluctuation in the headline inflation rate. But ultimately, we should end at around 11% by end of this year.
From 3.6, government wants to go to a GDP growth rate of 6.3. That's like doubling the current figure.
Yeah, and that's just exactly the same forecast we put out in January this year.
But that looks like, because the World Bank even estimated in 2017 may go as high as 7%.
Yeah, but you need to be a bit conservative, partly because you have the oil factor, particularly with the problems with Jubilee FPSO, that you don't have the technical expertise readily available to correct it. And because of that, the Jubilee FPSO can produce about 68,500 barrels per day. And then you're expecting that 10 oil fields will ramp up to 50,000 barrels per day. If you put those two together, you should be getting something in the region of 118,500 barrels per day. Bring on board Sankofa, which should start about third quarter this year. That should take you close to about 120,000 barrels per day. Conservatively, you're still looking above 100,000 barrels per day. That should support growth. But that is not enough. This increased barrel would also be sold at a higher price of about $56 per barrel compared to last year's price of $45 per barrel.
There's a more modest estimation for the non-oil, what they call it, GDP growth, that's 4.6. Is that reasonable?
I think it is because, for instance, you look at agriculture. Over the years, one of the problems our sector, agricultural sector has faced has been the reliance on the weather and the rainfall. So you need to be a bit more modest in that regard. And if you look at our growth pattern also, increasingly it was led by sectors like public administration, construction, public health, finance. Now you want to retool and retrofit it to go back towards agriculture and manufacturing. You need to be a bit cautious. And I think that is the cautious approach that is being taken to achieve that.
There's very little said about the exchange rate and how they're going to deal with it, but that's an important indicator of how healthy your economy will be. Do you think that the current government can fix the current exchange rate crisis some say we have on our hands?
Well, the main reason why they did not directly speak to exchange rate is because exchange rate is within the domain of monetary policy. And so they can only do fiscal policy to support monetary policy to achieve exchange rate stability or sustain exchange rate stability. One of the problems the city is facing today is as a result of the fiscal hangover, if you like, that we faced from the elections last year because of the excess spending. Because if you watch the pace and the trend of depreciation, you'll notice that it picked up after there was an announcement of fiscal overruns, unexpected to the market. And so investors, especially the foreign investors, started exiting the CD positions into dollars. And so that is affecting the city. If you now have a government that says that I am going to try and restore fiscal sustainability, then the city should start benefiting from that. But one thing is very key.
Anytime soon?
Well, I think that I'll be looking at about the second half of this year, because for the first quarter
of
this year...
Are we likely to go higher within the space you're having it? Because you're looking at 5.7, 5.8 as we speak.
I mean, I think we are likely to go marginally higher. Between now and the second quarter, we could still go marginally higher because the cedi is still under immense pressure. If you look at the foreign exchange market, it's still a net bid position. You need a lot more supplies.
The Bank of Ghana would have just pumped in money.
Well, yeah, but of course, you also have to manage your reserve. Again, because in July last year, there was a change to the FX repatriation rules. That says that a lot of these companies, like the mining sector and so on and so forth, should sell directly to the banking sector. Those FX are no longer coming to the Bank of Ghana, and so they cannot sell them back. They are already expected to be in the sector. So that limits...
i.e., Bank of Ghana doesn't have enough dollars to pump into the system.
No, that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that they expect the dollars that should have come to them to already be on the markets.
Okay.
So in that sense, there is little intervention you should expect from the central bank.
So the shortage is currently acute, it looks like.
Well, yeah, and it looks like there are hoardings going on. And you need to ensure that there is a restoration of investor confidence so that they can release those dollars that have been hoarded. I think it has to do with investor confidence.
You're an entrepreneur. I mean, having to do business in this republic and also be on your own requires a lot of buying from even external sources. Yeah. Exchange rate is a big deal, isn't it?
Definitely it is. I mean, I think about 2 years ago, I had a conversation with one man who was talking about the fact that he was going through some receipts and he found a receipt of some payments I think he made about a year ago, and I think the payment was about $50,000. When he now looked at the current value of that $50,000, he realized that as a businessman, he had lost greatly. And so you realize that, I mean, if
yeah, so now business, he would actually, if he, in let's say 2007, he needed a little under the 50,000 Ghana cedi to actually purchase the $50,000 worth of goods. Now he will need more than 4 times the particular amount.
Even I think it was even just this morning when I was listening to a discussion on radio, and there was a gentleman who was saying that, I mean, previously if they needed about $10,000, I mean, which was an equivalent of about 40,000 Ghana cedis to buy and sell, they now need an equivalent of 47,000 Ghana cedis to be able to get $10,000. So a difference of $7,000. Of course, you and I know in the kind of dispensation we live in, 7,000 Ghana cedis can do a lot of things for you. And so definitely with this exchange rate issue, it is a problem. But the problem is that it is the consumer who suffers at the end of the day, because the motive of every businessman is to be able to maximize profit and minimize cost. And so if I have to incur a lot of money to be able to get, I mean, some services delivered or some goods
to import goods,
for instance, at the end of the day, I will transfer the burden of cost to the final consumer.
That's what you entrepreneurs do.
Well, that's not what entrepreneurs do. That is the motive of every businessman.
Of course,
I mean, every businessman exists in business primarily to be able to maximize profit and minimize cost. And that is why, I mean, in recent times, you realize that even when we had this doom saw issue just quite recently.
Sorry, but this may have an impact on the inflation that we expect to be going down now too.
Definitely. Definitely. But
so do you see that as a realistic target they put on inflation, mindful of what the current situation is?
Well, it is possible. It is possible because, I mean, if you look at what my brother said, for instance, I mean, there also could be a possibility where people are also holding foreign exchange. If you take the Nigerian economy, for instance, you will realize that in Nigeria, as we speak today, it has become extremely difficult to have access to foreign exchange. Extremely difficult. Even the banks are not willing to make foreign exchange available to genuine businessmen who need money just to be able to transact business. And so, I mean, just opposing it to what is happening in our current situation in Ghana, I mean, having a situation where even some people may be holding foreign exchange, it now makes it difficult for people to have access to foreign exchange. When people have, I mean, find it difficult to to have access to foreign exchange, what it then means is that the demand for foreign exchange will be far more than the supply for foreign exchange. When that happens, it means that even the exchange rate can even go higher, and that may be an artificial situation that may be created. And so definitely as business people, I mean, we definitely are concerned when we have a situation where the city is not doing too well against the major currencies.
I'll be coming to you and asking you exactly what issues you were expecting him to address, which were not addressed in this particular budget. And the finance minister's statement, of course, actually captured a lot of things. Some say it's a very comprehensive one, a populist one that every other person from the KIA straight down to the students who want to go to school and get free SHS, and also through to the spare parts dealer is going to benefit from. Through to the big industries too, they're also going to benefit from this particular budget. But let's understand this from the perspective of what the taxes regime is. The NPP promised the removal of several taxes. Indeed, it was said to be impossible then. But it seems they are serious about doing this. They have made commitments. I can list a couple of them. It says they're going to abolish the 1% special imports levy, abolish the 17.5% VAT NHIL on financial services, and abolish the 17.5 VAT NHIL on selected imported medicines that are not produced locally, and also initiate steps to remove import duties on raw materials and machinery for production within the context of the ECOWAS Common Tariff External Tariff Regime. Now, he also said they will abolish the 17.5% VAT and NHIL on domestic airline tickets and abolish the 5% VAT NHIL on real estate sales. They also abolish excise duty on petroleum, reduce special petroleum tax rate from 17.5% to 15% abolish duty on the importation of spare parts, and that's where the Abosoka people were pretty much excited about. There was also talk about abolish levies imposed on Kaya by local authorities. Okay, then what? So let's listen to Minister Ken Ofori-Atta, Finance Minister, delivering specifically the tax cuts that the government intends to proceed with in this particular fiscal year. When we come back, we'll be analyzing that too.
A number of tax measures have been introduced in recent years in an attempt to deal with revenue shortfalls. Some have proven to be nuisance taxes. They have low revenue yielding potential and at the same time impose significant burden on the private sector and on the average Ghanaian citizen. As part of our commitment to re-energize the private sector, government has decided, as pledged, to review these taxes to provide relief for businesses. The following specific measures shall be implemented in the short to medium term. With this budget, abolish the 1% special import levy. Abolish the 17.5% VAT on financial services. Abolish the 17.5% VAT on selected imported medicines that are not produced locally. Initiate steps to remove import duties on raw materials and machinery, for production within the context of the ECOWAS Common External Tariff Protocol. We will abolish the 70.5% of domestic airline tickets. We will abolish the 5% VAT on real estate sales. We will abolish excise duty on petroleum. Mr. Speaker, we will reduce the special petroleum tax rate. We will reduce the special petroleum tax rate from 70.5% to 15%. Mr. Speaker, to all of our friends in Abosokai, we would abolish duty on the importation of spare parts.
So striking comments of relevance, especially when it's to do with tax cuts. People don't like paying taxes, really. So anytime there are tax cuts in any form, they will be excited by bold decisions of government as whether they'll be carried out or not. It's a different thing altogether. But let me come back into the studios here. We are discussing the 2017 budget, and as our continued comprehensive coverage of what's supposed to be the responsibility of the president handed through the finance minister to the republic on the financial statement and also the economic policy of the state, which is supposed to be delivered in tandem with Article 179 of the 1992 Constitution. And I do have here with me Courage Kisley Mate, who's a senior economic analyst with the Data Bank Research, and also entrepreneur Paul Dripson. And the conversation is pretty much about what you heard, why this budget is a different budget, and what's going to do to you and many of the people out there. So, plethora of taxes. I counted 15 different ones. Reductions, some of them will be abolished entirely, but I also saw a part where they were going to review or try to go through a certain motion to deal with a certain level of taxes on raw materials too. Generally, let me come to the entrepreneur first. Exciting moments in Ghana for you?
Well, let me say first of all that it's a good news, because I mean, if you look at the 17% on financial services, for instance, that is going to be abolished, it's something that will reduce a lot of pressure on business people. I mean, you will agree with me that over the past couple of years, I mean, it's become extremely difficult even for business people doing business in Ghana to be able to access loans from our banks. Because when you make the mistake of your life of going to seek for a loan facility from a bank, the kind of interest rates...
Mistake of your life, really?
Mistake of your life.
Really?
The kind of interest rates they would slap you with. If you are not careful, your business may collapse in the process. I mean, some of us are very much aware of some international funding opportunities that even gives up to 2.5% interest rates. And so if I can get access to international funding opportunities, which I'm going to pay about 2.5% interest rate, as compared to what we pay here, which is over 30%, then I think that it's not something that supports and encourages businesses to thrive.
But would you not be scratching the surface rather? I mean, the substantive issue is to do the interest rate itself and not necessarily the tax, isn't it?
Well, it is true. It is true. But then if you have a situation where the tax is removed, the tax element is removed, definitely it will have an impact also on the rate of interest.
The reaction then is that how many people in this republic are even banked in the first place? How is the financial service extended to those who are outside the emblem, and how are they going to benefit in that case?
Well, it's very true. I mean, if I may recall, I overheard the minister even talking about the fact that they were going to put measures in place to ensure that even the mobile money system also becomes very lucrative and also is able to do well. You realize that most people who are not banked, most people who don't have dealings with the financial institutions, have dealings with our mobile money systems.
Okay.
Many of them. And so if you have a situation whereby government can put measures in place to ensure that apart from the traditional method of banking, they can also focus some attention on the mobile money system, then it will be an opportunity to be able to get the unbanked even on the financial platform.
The petroleum tax,
Yeah.
would it have any impact on you, entrepreneurship, businesses, industry in Ghana?
Well, let me answer this by saying that, I mean, I think about a year and a half ago when we were having this energy crisis, I spoke to a colleague of mine or a friend of mine who works with one of these oil marketing companies. And as we spoke, what he told me was that every blessed week, they spent not less than 1,800 Ghana cedis to buy fuel to service their generating plant. Because the power supply was not consistent.
Okay.
And so if you multiply 1,800 by 4 weeks, it meant that every month they were paying over 5,000 Ghana cedis just to be able to buy fuel, to be able to service their generating plant. And of course, they were paying not less than 2,000 Ghana cedis also to ECG. And so if you even added the 2,000 they were paying to ECG to the over 5,000 they were paying, I mean, for fuel to power their generating plants, it meant that in a month they were spending over 7,000, close to 8,000 Ghana cedis just on energy alone. And so if you have a situation whereby the taxes on petroleum have been reduced from 5% to 2%, it's a clear indication that definitely it will have an effect on the prices of petroleum products.
I'll come back to you and ask you what you wanted them to do and they didn't do. But these are bold removal of taxes. It looks exciting, but what's the impact on the economy of the Republic of Ghana? And are they sustainable?
Well, you see, I think that what we need to also realize is that they did not touch direct taxes. Most, and I think all of the taxes that are being touched are indirect taxes. And this is the philosophy. And they've been saying this all along, that the idea is to ensure that they free up capital and disposable income for businesses and consumers to engage in productive and consumption activities that would then result in productivity, higher profit.
These are sequences of logical expectations which may fail in reality.
Well, that is why I said earlier that they have a huge responsibility in ensuring tax compliance.
Okay.
Because if you give out all of
which
this...
Which is a very difficult thing to do in this country.
Well, yeah, but then they have taken the mantle. And that's why I think that it's not going to come easy. So I started by saying that it's a constrained discretion they're trying to apply here. Within the constraint, they're trying to ensure that they also give that space so that at the end of the day, they get it from the back. Because remember, they also promised to reduce corporate taxes from 25% to 20%, but they didn't do that. The reason is because they are expecting that through the reduction in some of these indirect taxes and through their use of or ensuring compliance, they get it through the increase in profits that you will get, maintaining the 25% corporate tax at least for this year. So at the end of the day, it is expected that